Let's talk straight talk.
I can hear you talking.
Straight talk live.
Did I hear you say? Did I hear you say?
Straight talk.
Did I hear you say? Did I hear you say?
Straight talk live.
Talking straight. Did I hear you say?
Straight talk.
With Edna.
Straight talk live.
We're talking straight.
Let's talk straight talk.
I can hear you talking.
Straight talk live.
Talking straight. Did I hear you say?
Straight talk.
With Edna.
Straight talk live.
We're talking straight. I can hear you talking.
Straight talk live.
Talking straight. Did I hear you say straight talk? With Edna.
Straight talk live.
I can hear you talking.
Straight talk live.
Let's talk.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Straight Talk Live. I'm your host, Edna Howell-Parrish. Welcome, everyone. As you're just checking in this morning, we're glad you're doing it. Be sure to like and share the program. That communicates to our hosts and our producers and everyone that we have people that really follow us every Sunday morning. And as you file in, we want to really welcome you to the show. Um, oh, man, Anthony Prosser is here. He said, like and share, fam. You know that's right. Joy Williams Brown, good morning from Arkansas. Good morning, Arkansas. Rise and Shine. Charity Monique Green from Atlanta, the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia. Good morning, Joyce Keith from Centerville. Kayla Amina. Good morning, Kayla. How are you today? And a blessed Sunday morning, family, Mr. Prosser. Thank you so much. Again, be sure to like and share the show today. Before we begin, I really want to give honor again to and say a congratulations to Nathan Ivy, who is the engineer for the show, the behind the scenes man, the creator, the innovator. He received the NAACP Cincinnati chapter Inspiring Innovator Award last night. So, congratulations to Nathan Ivy, the Inspiring Innovator Award. And why would they give that to brother? Why would they give it to him? It's given to organizations or persons who change the world we live in with their innovation and creativity. So, what did Brother Nathan do that's so innovative and creative? An innovator is somebody who helps to open up a new line of research or technology or art or groundbreaker. He could be a groundbreaker, a pioneer, or a trailblazer. And you say, well, what has he done? In the area of social media, Nathan has opened up the umbrella. And under this umbrella, he has a company, Cincinnati Digital Media. And under Cincinnati Digital Media, it is a Black owned media company that believes in the power of Black, Brown women and marginalized voices. He offers the most unfiltered voices in the tri state. And so, what he does, he provides an opportunity for creators, innovators, people like me. I've been in broadcasting over 30 years myself, but I came back to social media because of Nathan. I heard his show, uh, contacted Nathan, and Nathan is producing people with shows like me. So I'm able to come back on the radio and give you all an opportunity to be part of Straight Talk Live from a new generational standpoint for all generations. And so we thank you, Nathan, for creating Cincinnati Digital Media and for providing opportunities for other people like myself who want to have a voice out there in the market again. So thank you, Nathan, for that. And as you check in this morning, you can also put in your comments. I know Nate will tell all about it on his own show, The Nathan Ivy Show, but there are other people that have shows just like this, and so he's going to in upcoming weeks and months, he's going to be putting that information out there. So I just want to say to you, brother Nate, we're a winner. You're a winner. Never let anybody say, "Boy, you can't make it," because a feeble mind is in your way. No more tears. Do we cry? And we have finally dried our eyes, and we're moving on up. Lord have mercy, we're moving on up. That's from Curtis Mayfield. I thought about that when I thought about you receiving that award. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't make it. Well, on Straight Talk Live this morning with Edna Howell-Parrish, our guest is an innovative woman herself. Now, when we talk about people being abused and sexually abused, we talked about the R. Kelly situation, found guilty of all of his abuse of some women. He still has to go on trial. But R. Kelly is not the only abuser. And the abuser could be your father, could be your mother, could be your sister, your brother, your husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. Anybody out there in the marketplace can be an abuser. And this morning on Straight Talk Live, we have a young woman who I asked the question about her many years ago. And so today she's coming back with adding to her book. She has a new book out, and we're going to welcome Holly Sowells. Holly Jenkins Sowells. I got the name all messed up. I said I wasn't going to say it, but it's Holly Jenkins. Welcome to Straight Talk Live, Holly.
Well, thank you, Edna. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, Holly Jenkins is an international speaker and award-winning author, documentary filmmaker, and certified professional coach. And she's received so many awards, and I won't even go into all of them, but I'll mention a few. She is the Ohio Library Association Author of the Year, Cincinnati Enquirer Woman of the Year nominee. She's a Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Woman of the Year, and so many other awards that she has received from the Cincinnati community. And we thank you so much for that. Holly this morning is here to talk about her book, Daddy Don't Letters to My Father, a story of incest, volume 2. When I say volume 2, that puts emphasis on something that you've done that's new and different with Letters to My Father, Daddy Don't.
Yes, I wrote the first book many years ago, as you know, and people have always continually asked me questions about, like, what happened, or did you have resolution, or how did all that work, and how are you now after all of these years? So, in order to answer all of that, I just wrote volume 2. Now, anyone who didn't read the first book, you don't have to buy both. You can buy volume 2 because I included the entirety of all the letters that were in the first book, and I just added to them, did a lot of explanation, resolution, things like that. So within Daddy Don't Volume 2, the first book is in there already.
Daddy Don't Letters to My Father, a story of incest, volume 2. I asked the question, was your abuser, could it have been a girlfriend, a boyfriend? Could it have been a neighbor next door? Could it have been your mother, your father? Who was your abuser?
It was my father, hence the name of the book, Daddy Don't. But you're right. It's just not fathers. It's not just stepfathers. I have had the occasion to talk to and hear about many women who abuse their children sexually, just like men do. It could be an older sibling or a cousin. It could be anyone. It's not like there's a prototype. It's across the board, doctors, attorneys, nurses. It doesn't matter. People who have that propensity to do something like that, it doesn't have anything to do with their career choice or their gender or their age. It's just kind of like I call it an opportunity crime.
I want to welcome our guest this morning, Holly Jenkins. And Kayla Amina is calling in and checking in this morning. Good morning. Joyce is here. Charity's here. Joy Williams, Anthony, Brenda Early. Good morning. Happy Sunday, she says. Brandy Waddell, greetings. Kayla Amina, congrats to Nate Ivy. This award couldn't have went to a more deserving person. I agree. And Nakia Lovett is here this morning checking in with us. Congratulations, Nathan Ivy. Well, Holly, let's get into the meat of the subject. You wrote your first book, Daddy Don't, many years ago, as you said, back in the 90s, I believe. What made you start talking about and publishing, wanting to write a book about abuse?
Well, first of all, I did not think about or want to write a book about abuse. I was in therapy myself, in counseling at Women Helping Women here in, Cincinnati is a local organization that supports, people who've been sexually assaulted or abused in any way. And who was the associate director at the time, a lady named Karen Welsh. I had written the letters, like, just sort of as my own way of getting the things outside of myself into reality. So it wasn't written for public consumption, I'll say. But she had read the letters that I had written, and she encouraged me to have them published, because she felt that it would help a lot of people. And if I wasn't really keen on that idea, because I wasn't really trying to let my friends and relatives know what had happened, because I had kept it a secret all those years. But she continued to support me through that process of adding more letters, digging a little bit deeper in some of them. And so I started, the idea of a book did, come to fruition. And I went the traditional publishing route. At least I tried to. I got an agent. I sent it out. Who they were sending it out to a lot of publishers, and we just kept getting rejection after rejection after rejection. No way that they wanted to publish those letters. And so by then, I really wanted them out there, so I self-published the book myself. And with help of the media such as yourself, I think your show was the first one I did, and from there it just like blew up all over the place, and which was a blessing. And I was able to speak internationally with the book. So that's how it all happened. It wasn't like I sit down and said, well, let me write a book about what happened. It wasn't that easy.
Checking in with our guest this morning, Janetta Warren is with us. Congratulations, Janetta, from Dayton. I know you're from Dayton. First Lady of Zap, Mattress Gone. Welcome, Sunday morning, and blessings to all, he says. Anthony, he said, as a father myself, I can't even imagine being able to commit such an atrocity against your own child. Again, congratulations to Nathan from Darlene K. And Kaylee Amina says, why is there not programs that help children, men and women identify what sexual abuse is and how and where to report it? How will a child identify abuse coming from the people they trust the most? So I'm going to stop right there and ask that question. She says, why is there not programs that help children and men and women identify what sexual abuse is? And then the second part, how will a child identify abuse coming from the people they trust the most?
Okay, I would like to address the second question first.
Okay.
How will a child, identify the abuse when it's coming from, a family member or people that they're supposed to trust? Well, first of all, it's only those people that someone trusts who are entrusted with the care of a child. I tell people, like, the wino walking down the street or whatever, they don't have the opportunity to babysit anybody. So they're not your most likely abuser. It's those, parents, grandparents, trusted neighbors, friends that you will leave your child with, who has that opportunity in the first place. So that's how a child cannot identify, anyone, it's not like, that stranger danger. It's not necessarily the strangers that are abusing children. That's not who's doing this. And they all, abusers are smart in this area. They will groom the child, is what they call it. They will groom the child, befriend them, buy them, ice cream, take them places. That's why a lot of coaches you see are are abusers. And when I say a lot, just take that as it's just my figure of speech. But there are a lot of coaches who groom children. They don't maybe even like basketball or football. They just want the proximity to children. So therefore they volunteer to do these things or get a job doing it. You read about it in the paper all the time. Or pediatricians. It's like I said, it's just equal opportunity. And as far as the programs, it's still a sticky subject for a lot of people. A lot of people still don't like to talk about child abuse, because one of the things I said in my my book is that you don't want to think of your husband or your dad or your pastor as someone who would abuse someone. So you don't. Children, we just don't think of it that way. So it just doesn't feel good on the tongue to say the word incest or sexual abuse. So we don't talk about it. And our community, and I'm specifically talking about the African American community, we have a culture of not talking about what goes on in our house. So even if it's happening, there's seldom any help sought. They don't call the police. You don't want your neighbors to know what happened. What'll happen if, the abuser goes to jail? How we're going to pay the rent? All of these things get mixed up in there, and the child is just left unprotected.
How many organizations out there? How many organizations out there really support children who are victims of abuse?
I think that there's more than we know about because we don't look for that. I think something could be in the paper and you just kind of glance at it and keep moving. You don't read that whole story. You might read the headline, but you never read down in the bottom, like, maybe at the very end, what agency is involved. Like, you've got, Family and Children's Services, and you've got like Women Helping Women. I think there are exactly a lot more agencies than there was when I was growing up being abused. There was nothing back then. I mean, nothing. So, and in fact, most therapists and so forth, they hadn't even received any training in childhood sexual abuse. So now there's a lot more, but you still you got to want the information to get it. It's not just going to be something that's just laying around someplace. You got to seek it out, and because most people don't.
When you first wrote your book, Daddy Don't, and looking at the book cover, it's got this childhood scrawl, pencil, ink, crayon look, because you got a crayon on the cover of it, and it looks very childish. So let's go back to when you were 5 years old, and I understand from you that's when your abuse started with your dad. Coming home from prison, you out there making mud pies and playing. Your mom told you to stay clean because your daddy's coming home. You didn't know what a daddy was. Tell us about that.
Exactly. Apparently my father had went to jail before I could even remember anything. I'm real fuzzy on some of those details, but I just never got them. But I remember, I was kind of a tomboy because, I was the youngest child and I had 4 older brothers. So you either play in the mud, play football, or you play by yourself. So I wasn't used to staying clean all day. I was a tomboy. So, she was real adamant, don't get dirty, don't get dirty, don't get dirty. And, here I am, like, I guess he was taking too long to get there because I went around the side of the house and I was making mud pies. And I remember the first time I saw him, I didn't know who he was, of course, but, everybody kept on saying, this is your daddy, and so, my mother was just like very, very angry because I was like covered head to toe with mud. But, he kept on saying it was okay. My dress was still fine and everything. And he picked me up. And it was just, I felt that, I felt this is a good thing. I thought I'm going to like this daddy business, because he protected me from my mother who, in the book, I talk about her. We can talk about that later. But even though she was a non-offending parent, she knew what was going on and she did nothing to protect me. And so I really like that idea of having a father.
Indeed, indeed. Well, then did the abuse happen all at one time and you started ranting and screaming to your mom, and what happened?
Oh no. Like you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned the grooming process. It was just like, I was daddy's little girl. Sometimes he would take me places that he wouldn't take, my brothers. He would take me to a movie and buy me, everything to be, that was there. And he just treated me very, very special. And I was just, love my daddy. I love this whole idea. And so it wasn't just all of a sudden. And it started off slow. And it started so slow that I didn't even know the word abuse anyway, but I didn't feel anything was off, so to speak. I didn't realize it, because he became my primary caregiver, like as far as making sure, I took my bath, got my bath, things like that. And, he would come in and, I guess I can say what I need to say in this platform, but he told me once, the first thing that I remembered back was that he said, he didn't want to use the washcloth because it was all rough and he didn't want to hurt me between my legs, so he would just use his fingers instead. So to a 5-year-old, that makes sense. Looking back at it, everyone in the audience I know immediately knew that that was abusive. But can you see how a 5-year-old wouldn't know that it was abusive? Because I'm thinking, oh, he don't want to hurt me. So, I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. No one had talked about good touch, bad touch with me. Nobody had said what was proper or improper with me. So therefore, I didn't know. I just didn't know. And I want to throw this in here real quick, and we can talk about when we get to how it affects you as an adult later. But looking back as an adult, as I was writing those letters, I actually started feeling stupid. I said, how stupid could you have been not to know that he was abusing you? And then I had to sort through all of that, because I started feeling guilty, ashamed, and all those things started setting in on me. And now as a healthy, adult, I understand, and I can sort all that out, that I wasn't supposed to understand that I was being abused at 5 years old.
Daddy,
so I didn't tell my mom either, because he told me to keep it a secret.
Keep it a secret, and that's exactly what you do. Mattress Gone says, I agree. It's unsaid things in our community and culture that happens every day unsaid. It's the uncles they have been in and out of jail, cousins, preachers, the people who are close to the victims. And then Anthony says, right, if the person a child trusts in all phases of their care, they would tend to think that the sexual abuse is okay. He would think that, and I would too. And in the letters that you wrote to your father, were the letters inflammatory, or were they saying to him, "I know what you did was wrong, and I'm sorry"? Because did you ever confront him?
The letters are more just chronicling how the abuse evolved. I have a letter in there about, making the mud pies and him coming home from prison. I have a letter in there about, him using his fingers instead of, the washcloth. And in the letter, I said, thank you for not hurting me, because I wrote the letters from whatever, from the viewpoint of the child. It's not like me speaking now saying this is what happened and this is what he did. The letters are written that I am writing him a letter at age 5 and what's going on with me. The letters were written, like as I aged, like when I was like 8, I wrote letters from the viewpoint of an 8-year-old. It was like, dear daddy, you remember, like taking me to the movie and me sitting on your lap because I couldn't see over the heads of the adults in front of us. And I said, I must have been too heavy because you kept moving around all over the place. Now, that was from a child's perspective, but the reader can fully see what he's doing. But you can also see that as a child, I didn't know what he was doing.
Once the book was written, Daddy Don't Letters to My Father, what kind of reaction did you get from the public to the book and your ability to express yourself and your feelings back in the 1993, I guess, when you first wrote the book? Was it good, positive reaction?
I would say 95% of it was very positive, very supportive. Like I said, the media, I guess it was just, like they said, like it was just at the right place at the right time because the media was all over it. I did a lot of media coverage on the book. So that was good. Friends and family, absolutely. Some of my best friends who I never told. I have a friend that she lives in Florida now. We've been friends for over 50 years. And I mean, we were like best friends. I mean, like this. And I had never told her what was going on in my home. And so she cried because she said, you know that you could have told me that. And I'm like, no, I didn't know I could tell you that. I never felt safe enough to tell anybody that. But, and I said 95% because there was 5% that, and I remember this one man was at a workshop that I did. And he looked at me and said, this is after the workshop, he said, I don't know why you're saying all of this stuff. This doesn't happen in, the Black community. And so I'm like looking at my arm like, excuse me, I'm Black and it happened in not just my community, but it happened in my home. And I said, it happens. And just like I said earlier, our community, in the African-American community, we are like, to the detriment of our families. We're so closed-mouthed about what's going on. We resist therapy a lot of times. We resist asking for help for, issues. There's mental illness in our communities and we will not even acknowledge it, so, and a lot of the mental illness, comes from abusive homes, whether it's, mine was physically as well as sexually abusive. And, those kind of, upbringing sets up, a playground for mental illness, but our community is still lags behind in opening up and going to therapy about it. It's like, we just don't want anybody to know. It's a stigma in our community when you're really a victim. So I don't know why you are stigmatized by it, but it's just the way it is.
And back then, your mom never gave you the talk about the good touch, bad touch. So you had no idea that when you were being touched and things happened to you, there was no way for you to even understand it. So I know that parents need to start talking. And we always say that you got to start talking to your children. It's never too early, is it?
No, I tell people in my workshops as soon as a child starts understanding, body parts, we teach them that's your leg, that's your arm, that's your eye, that's your nose, these are your knees. We do all of that, but we never mention those, private areas. We just don't do it, because they're saying, oh, they're too young for that. Well, maybe not, and what I did personally, when my kids got old enough, like they have a little swimsuit on and anything under here is private and it's personal and no one is to touch you there, or anybody make you feel uncomfortable. It's okay to tell me. And I love the name of your show, Straight Talk. I had a straight talk conversation, with my kids about sexual abuse, about, and was I overprotective? I don't think that word applies when it comes to protecting children. A lot of people told me that I was overprotective because I didn't let my girls go to sleepovers. I didn't let them, just hang out with people, go to somebody's house and stay. We didn't do any of those kind of things. And when they were really young, they didn't understand that, but it was still my job. I didn't care if they understood it or not. It was my job to protect them. And that's what I did.
Shannon Dobbs says it starts with making children hug people just because they're family. Oh, go over and hug Uncle. Uncle got a nickel
Absolutely.
for you. Uncle got a quarter for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a pet peeve of mine, to go to a family reunion and, you see people dragging, and I mean literally dragging their children over to grandpa or Uncle so-and-so or Aunt Bessie or whatever. And the child is like got their little feet dug in the sand. They're trying not to go. And they make them, and they'll say, you go and give him a kiss, he'll probably give you $1, so like, are we prostituting here? What's going on? So, but that's what we do. And I believe that it's totally innocent, but it's still detrimental and it's still harmful. And I want parents to quit doing that, quit letting everybody, pick up your kid just because they've got your same bloodline, and somebody will say, oh, he's just driving everybody crazy. So, I need to run to the store to get some ice, or I'll just take him with me to get him out of everybody's hair. You have not seen this man for 10 years, but you're going to let him drive away with your kid to get some ice. Don't do things like that. And I apologize if I'm getting too animated or too passionate. Those kind of things are what leaves children so unprotected, and it's the parent's job. And sometimes, I've had, my, second and third husband, before I would even discuss us being in a relationship, you had to know who I was, what I stand for in this area, not just all the other areas of life, but this area, don't even try it. Don't even go there, because I am watching.
Indeed, indeed. T. Nicole Taylor says, anyone too friendly with kids, she said, I'm watching like a hawk. Having been molested as a child herself, she said, it's always the one that's so nice that no one expects. And then Janice says, I never made any children of mine hug anyone. And Shannon Jobs said, tickling is a no-no. It's a forced touching that forces laughter under an uncomfortable situation. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. And I have a list of, and I'm glad that Shannon mentioned the tickling. I have a whole list of things that are inappropriate, that people, that could be viewed in one thing in and of itself, not necessarily so, and it doesn't make it child abuse, but it can be a sign of child abuse, and tickling is definitely one of them. Hugs that last too long. And I see that Shannon also mentioned, children, being hugged, just family. And sometimes a hug can be a little too long, a little too low, or, so you have to watch out for things like that. And, inappropriately sleeping with children, oh, they can just get up on the bed with me. Well, maybe not so much, because it's those things that we think are so innocent that end up being the most deadly things in a child's life. And if one parent is saying, oh, it's okay if you do that, then the offending parent has a gateway to do this. And I want to just say real quickly, I want to go back to, the body parts. Naming the body part. It is a vagina. It is a penis. It is a nose. It is a knee. It is an elbow. It's a vagina. It's a foot. It's the top of your head. It's a penis. You've got to get comfortable with children knowing the names of their body parts. It's not a doohickey. It's not a thingamajig. It's not a wee-wee. It's none of that. It's a vagina and it's a penis. And we've got to get okay with children knowing those body parts. And why that is so important is there was a story, and I know Edna's going to get into, our trips to Marysville Prison later, but there was a lady there who she was taught that her vagina was a cat. And I know probably every woman on here knows that story. You call it this, you call it that. But her uncle had came to live with them. And she told her mom one day that uncle played with my cat. Well, these people had a tabby cat laying in the corner. So her mother looked at the cat and said, oh, that's okay. That's no big deal. It's fine. So the little girl thinking, well, it's okay. But they were not talking about the same cat. So the next time the uncle touched her, she put up no resistance at all, because her mother had told her that it was okay for her uncle to play with her cat.
Shannon Dobbs reiterates exactly what you said. She says teaching the body's anatomy is something that Black people just don't do. She said it's foreign to us.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump real quick to your book came out. You did media with me. You started working with people. You started giving workshops. People began to talk and give their testimonies about being abused, and they did it on Straight Talk Live, and then you started doing workshops in the prisons for women.
Yes, that came about because the she was one of the directors at the prison, had read my book, and she invited me to come speak to some of the women at the prison who had disclosed that they had been sexually abused. And she gave me a number that was just astounding to me, that 85% of the women in our prison systems were victims of incest or other childhood sexual trauma. That number blew me away. And when I first started going there, I had a group of about 35 women. And I went there for several years. And by the time, that I wasn't, going there anymore, there was like 250 women in our group.
Wow.
So they slowly, once it proved to be a safe place, more and more women were coming and joining the group and sharing their stories.
And then we went up there. You invited me to come up, and I wanted to go and see what it was all about. So me,
Yes,
curiosity just had to
yes.
find out, and it
And it
was
was,
phenomenal.
and we were so blessed to have you come, and then you birthed the idea of doing a live show from the, and talking about the paperwork and the releases and everything. Every woman in attendance had to sign a release. We had to get permission from just about everybody and concerned with the prison. And it wasn't until, and it kind of stalled for a minute, and it wasn't until I met Judge Yvette McGee Brown, who a few years ago, she had ran for lieutenant governor here in Ohio, but she was, at that point, she was the sitting presiding judge in juvenile court in Columbus. And, I talked to her about what I was trying to do. And I mean, it was like what they call lickety split. She cut through every piece of red tape there was and got us in there. And we had a panel of people who went up, like probation officers, teachers, university professors, probation officers. We had people who, all those women many of the women at the prison, they went through those different stations in life, so to speak, or different organizations or criminal justice systems before they landed in prison. And never was there abuse linked to the lifestyle that they lived that landed them in prison. Because sexual abuse as children sets up a lifestyle, because you do not have a good sense of self-worth or self-esteem. So therefore you're, anything and everything goes. So you end up doing things that sometimes can land you in prison. The drug issues, the alcohol issues, things that you use to cope with it are not always healthy or legal. So a lot of people end up in prison, and that's what's the case with all the women there. There was so many of them that your heart would just break when you hear their stories of abuse and you understand how they ended up in prison. And sometimes being in prison is the first time they've ever even felt safe. That's a shame.
Yeah, and many of them talked about killing their abusers and their brothers, having children by their brothers impregnating them, and fathers, and it's just a sad situation. However, the word was out, other people jumped aboard. Then you began to counsel, to talk to people. You also wrote another book called Sexual Abuse 101 that I understand became mandatory reading for students who were studying this in college.
Yes, and that was a total shock to me, because I think I told you once before, I never went to any schools or organizations and asked them to use my book. It would just be that somebody would read it, see the value that they got from it, and introduce it to these institutions and organizations. And so when I found out that the book was required reading at some universities, first of all, I was shocked, and then I was honored. Childhood Sexual Abuse 101, and the subtitle of that book is Not an Elective. It shouldn't be something that we know about or not know about. I think everyone needs to know. And if people are going to be counseling people, they've got to get their information. They've got to be trained or taught from a standpoint of not just theory, because there is a lot of theory in our university. That has to be. I'm not knocking that part, but as much real life that they can get, hearing things from a victim instead of trying to decide yourself how this person feels. So me writing it from the standpoint of what like real life experience was of value to them.
Now, in your new book, Daddy Don't Letters to My Father, A Story of Incest, Volume 2, you also combine some of the information in your textbook, Child Abuse 101, not an elective. So with this, it's a kind of a bonus book.
Exactly. And because I didn't want people to say, oh my God, I got to go buy this book, got to go buy that. So if you buy volume 2, Daddy Don't, volume 2, you're getting all 3 books, really. And it's not a big book. I increased the size of it so that it wouldn't be a whole bunch of pages or anything. But if you get volume 2, you'll get the essence of all 3 books.
Okay, let's go back to our listeners checking in this morning. Um, Janice says, "Thank you, God, that I was able to be a stay-at-home mom with my children until they were preteens." She said, "I would have died if I had to take my precious babies to someone else to care for them, not knowing what was happening to them." Jeffrey called it subliminal destruction. uh, Janice, Jean Mulholland says, "Good morning, everybody." And then Nicole says, "A family friend was so attentive to the little girl at family function. I didn't like it. Lo and behold, the man managed to go upstairs where the girls were playing Barbies. I came up there like, what the hell are you doing up here? The adults are downstairs." And she said, GTFOH, exclamation point. I know what that means.
Yes.
Okay. So she caught him, getting ready to pounce on the kids. So it's amazing how those things do happen. Uh, just to cut to the chase, your book is available now for people to order. I think, Nate, we have information about how people can get information on Holly, the book. Holly herself is a certified counselor. She has information on how you can also get help in case you have a problem as well. So, Holly, you want to talk about that? How can people purchase the book and where can they go to get information?
Okay, first of all, you can go to my website to order the book, and that's restartyourlifenow.org. Make sure you put org, not .com, it's a .org. And you can reach me directly at holly@restartyourlifenow.org. That's my email. And so you can order the book. And, what I'm doing the first month, because as the orders come in, it hopefully, well, not necessarily hopefully, but, it might be a little bit hard for me to do. But, for the first month, anyone who orders the book through my website will get an autographed copy of my book. It will be available on Amazon.com soon, but right now you can only get it on at the addresses on your screen. And like I said, if you are interested in workshops or lectures or just talk to me personally, you can email me at that address on there, holly@restartyourlife.org, and include your contact information, and I'll call you. Or absolutely respond through the email, but reach out to you as well. And is one of the oldest agencies in Cincinnati that works with victims of child abuse, the Women Helping Women, and they have a hotline, and that's on the screen too. The 513-381-5610, and they have classes, they have workshops. If you need help for a family friend, they'll tell you how to, or a member or something like that, they'll tell you the process. And they even, have they will accompany you to court. They have people who are, specialize in doing those things. And you can get information also at Children's Hospital. I apologize, I didn't have that number up, but you can just look up Children's Hospital. And they have specific departments, for child abuse and things like that, so that you can even report child abuse anonymously. You don't have to give your name or anything like that, and they will, make sure that someone follows up with that.
Our guest this morning is a speaker, author, award-winning author, I might add, a documentary filmmaker, and a certified professional coach. Holly Jenkins. And Jeffrey says, I never even disclosed gender difference in any upbringing of any child, family member, or biological stepchildren. These divided teachings may lead these people to live in a different way than being able to go through life with the confidence that they have never taken advantage of. Being taught reality and right and wrong, age difference and relative relationship, all those specifics should get pointed out. But you're right, Miss Holly. We should be aware of who, where, and why my child is around. Could be risky, could be risky. So I agree with that. How old is too old to tell? How young is too young to tell when somebody is abusing you?
There's no restrictions at all. There's no too young, there's no too old. It's a matter of as soon as there's some awareness, if a child, and it's to me, it's those adults who are around that should be protecting them, should be watching the child's behavior. If they're uncomfortable around a certain adult, you need to find out why. If they're, if someone comes over and the child runs and hides and it's just not a play, you can tell that they're not playing, that they're afraid, you need to find out why. I they got mad at me about it, but I invited my brothers over once. This is when we were grown, but my girls were little. I invited them over and I told my daughters in front of my brothers, if your uncles ever make you uncomfortable or touch you in a way that you don't feel right, tell me. You're to tell on them. So my brothers were horrified that, because it's not like I told them what was going on, and maybe that was wrong of me, but I didn't care. Like I said, I was overprotective and could care less about that part. But then everyone knows. It's not enough just to tell your child to tell you. Those people who are in their circle need to know that that child will tell on them. That way, you lessen their chances of being abused if the abuser know that the child has been taught to tell. Because if they know it, they're not going to bother that child. But if they don't know, if they touch the child, yes, that child could come back and tell you, but the damage is done. They've already been touched. They've already, someone's already abused them. So I'd rather have it up front that everybody knows that these children will tell on to protect them.
Were you able to ever tell your mother about what happened or confront your dad about what happened?
Okay, I'll take the confronting my dad part first. There was no need to confront because it was just between me and him. We always knew that it happened. And, he would, even when I was like, 11, 12 years old, when he was still doing this, we both fully knew what he was doing. So it wasn't like when I, reached the age of 20, 25 that I wanted to go back and confront him. I never felt that word was part of our relationship. And, like with my mom, I tried to tell her a couple of times, but she would like cut me off and start telling me, how blessed I was that I had a father in my life and that, he cared about me so much. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm trying to tell you something completely opposite of this. And it was like, she just wasn't hearing me, and she never heard it. And so I quit trying. We never talked about it. We never had any conversation about what my father did. And we were all in the same house. There was times he would get out of her bed and come into my bed. So she was fully aware of what was going on, but it was just a subject that we never talked about.
Never talked about it. It's such an amazing story to me. A lot of people listening probably might be saying, I don't want to hear about this morning. I got to go to church and don't want to talk about that. But, you shared a story with me from the Bible about incest and sex. Let's share that quickly with our listeners.
Well, I tell the story, and first I don't even tell that it's from the Bible, but David's sons, Amnon and Absalom, they had a sister named Tamar. Well, one of the brothers started liking and lusting after Tamar. So, he ended up, inviting her over to fix him some food. In fact, King David had asked the daughter to go over and tend to her brother because he was playing sick. He wasn't sick at all. He was just playing sick. And so she went over and she fed him, and after he finished eating, he revealed his real motives to her, that he wanted to have sex with her. Well, she begged him not to, but he took her by force. He raped her. And then after he raped her, he looked on her with disgust. So he threw her out of the house. So now we're going into domestic violence, okay? He literally threw her out of the house into the dirt. And she did tell the other brother, Absalom, what had happened. And Absalom ended up killing, his brother because of what he had did. And now we're entering into murder. So if anyone wants to read that story, it's in 2 Samuel chapter 13. If you want to read that story, it's not made up. I'm not embellishing. That's what's in the Bible that happened. So this has been going on forever. This is not new. Incest is not new. So, but we still pretend like, oh my God, why are they talking about that subject? Like you said, it's Sunday morning. When there's no time limit on when this should be talked about, because right at this very second, millions of children are being abused as we speak. 1 out of every 3 women in this country are sexually molested in some way before they reach the age of 18. And that number is 1 in 4 for young men. There are a lot of men out there who've been sexually abused, and we normally keep the conversation around women because we talk, we run off at the mouth. We're liberated. We talk about it. Men are not so much so. They still feel that they can't talk about any abuse that they've suffered, and honestly, they can't. They're not safe yet. They're not safe in all circles yet, because then their sexuality comes into play. It doesn't happen when a woman says that she's been molested by a female. People don't question her sexuality. But if a man said he was so sexually molested, all of a sudden his sexuality is in question. So therefore, that stigma is on top of being abused. So they don't say anything. People are not going to open themselves up for that kind of criticism, and so they don't. But men are abused almost as much as women. Little boys, I have talked to men because I did a workshop at Warren County Correctional, because a lot of the men who are in prison, who've been sexually abused, they take on that, I've got to be rough and tough and prove that there's nothing wrong with me, to themselves, because a lot of them haven't told anyone else. They're trying to prove it to themselves that they're men. So that, I can rob, I can shoot, I can, do all these manly, rough things, when they're really hiding that little boy there that was sexually molested and left to fend for himself the rest of his life emotionally.
Eric Lindsay writes, I was under the impression for studies I have read that most abused people become abusers themselves. Clearly, that does not apply to all of the abused. Can you speak to that quickly?
That the abused become abusers, not necessarily. And I'll say, don't believe everything that you read, especially if, you get that in the media, because a lot of people just don't understand. But there are abusers who have been abused, and many, many of them have not. A lot of them are curious, and none of these are excuses, but a lot of people who are abused are just curious. They are deviant. They are, I can't think of all the words that I can call them, but they're not all victims of abuse themselves. And, I just want that clear. All of them are not, by no means.
Uh, Joy Williams Brown. Joy Williams Brown says, as a 17-year CASA Voices for Children volunteer in our juvenile court system, she can't stress how important it is to teach your children the correct names, as we talked about body parts, and who shouldn't touch you. One of her clients was sexually abused by her father, but because her mother did not protect her, she actually came to her hater mom and forgave her dad.
Yes, yes. I had that issue, and I do address that, in the book. But I had the hardest, much harder time healing from my mother's lack of protection than I did for what my father did. Because, if you watch, any nature show, even little birds will try to peck you to protect their nest. You mess with a mama bear's cub, man, you can shoot that. She's still coming at you, But sometimes the human mother, they don't. And it's hard to get in your head why you knew this was going on and you just let him do it. And I can only theorize, because I'm not that person. I can only theorize why things like that happen. Like I mentioned earlier, the who's the breadwinner, who's, if I tell on him and he go to jail, who's gonna pay these bills? And I don't, I can't take care of myself. Or what if the neighbors find out? Oh my God, if I report this, people at the church going to find out, that I've been living with this man or married to this man for 20, 30 years, and he's been abusing my kids. And I worked in a law office for years, and there was this one case that we had that this man had molested his daughters. And he came in with his wife looking for an attorney to, represent him and everything. And I'm sitting with the wife, and I asked her, I said, and this is, remember, this is before I wrote my book at all. I asked her, how are you with all of this? And this woman looked me in my face and said, at least he's not running the street.
What? Whoa.
I said, okay. I got up and I had to walk away. But you just think that mothers have this, I'll die protecting my kids. And fathers, there are fathers who know that their wives are molesting their children. Women molest children a lot more than we'll ever imagine, because women are caregivers much longer than a man can do it without suspicion. A woman can walk in on her teenage son taking a shower, say, oh boy, I ain't worried about you. I had you, you know what I'm saying? And then it's just dismissed, but she's in there peeping. Okay. So, and I know women who've molested their children. I mean, I know people, personally know these people, because I met them under the circumstances of workshops and in prisons and things like that they molest boys and they molest their daughters as well. This is huge.
Amazing. Janice Robertson says, God bless you. What a betrayal by your father. Thank you for your courage, says Nina Lewis. Looking forward to reading your new book. Can you believe the time has gone by so fast that it's time for us to go? However, before we go, I want to have Nate to put information back up on the screen and you to talk to people for coaching, counseling, information, workshops. If they want you to come to your church or organization to do workshops, you're available as well.
Absolutely. And that has been going on since the 90s. Since I wrote that first book, I still do workshops on child abuse. I have for years, I was the international president of Voices. The organization was Victims of Incest, Candy Murder Survivors. It's a defunct organization right now, but it was a clearinghouse of we had a list of all the resources in each state in the union, and some even across in Britain. But yes, I'm definitely available for parent groups, churches, counselors, anyone who wants to get the information and, to help other people or to help themselves. And please don't forget about Women Helping Women's hotline to pass out to anyone who needs crisis care or crisis information, so I don't want to forget that. But, my contact information is on the screen, the researchyourlifenow.org and Holly at researchyourlifenow.org, to reach me. And feel free to reach out on anything. I've had people call me and not say a word. I say hello and it's just silence. And I have sat there sometimes as long as a half an hour or more and just hoping that the person on the other end can breathe.
International speaker, I mean, you've been around the world speaking on this issue of childhood sexual abuse, and you've received many awards, documentaries. You've been president of the National Voices National Organization for Child Abuse. Used to run programs for Lighthouse Youth Shelter. So Holly is pretty seasoned in this area. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and to be on the show this morning and to share with us your new book, Childhood Sexual Abuse. Uh,
No,
it's just been amazing time. Thank you so much.
thank you so much for inviting me again, Edna, and thank you. That's all I can say.
All right. I appreciate you as well. And be sure to like and share the show. The recorded show will be available on my Straight Talk Live with Edna Howell-Parrish page or Cincinnati Digital Media. Later on, you'll be able to watch it again. And for those who didn't see it, it will be available. Thank you, Anthony, Nina, Eric, everybody who joined us on the show today. Again, congratulations to Nathan Ivy, our Cincinnati Digital Media creator, receiving the NAACP Image Award for Innovator for creating his Cincinnati Digital Media, something new, something different. We thank you all for listening. I'm Edna Howell-Parrish.